So we are wrapping up chapter 22, which is titled Origin of Species. So we're going to talk a little bit more about allopatric speciation, which we mentioned yesterday but didn't really go into depth. So how allopatric is going to fit in, it's kind of going to deal with geographic barriers. So speciation can be considered a two-step process where we have this identical population that must diverge or separate from each other. And then we also have to have reproductive isolation to maintain those differences. So a great example is the porkfish. At one point, there was just one population of porkfish, but then when the formation of the isthmus, I think I said that wrong, of Panama that formed 3.5 billion years ago, kind of forming this geographic barrier, we had speciation occur. So it diverged, they were reproductively isolated, and now we have the porkfish that's found in the Caribbean Sea, as you can see here, a little bit more colorful. And then down here, the porkfish of the Atlantic. Or sorry, Pacific Ocean. Yeah. We can also see this in species of snakes, kind of in eastern United States, with yeah, I hate snakes. Can I just move on, please?
I saw snakes on a plane last night. It was creepy.
So.
What was it about, Zach?
Anyways.
There were snakes on a plane.
That was okay.
So allopatric speciation takes place when, again, that it's geographically isolated. So another example, the kingfishers, how they vary throughout New Guinea, despite great variation in island topography and climates. But then by contrast, isolated populations on nearby islands are strikingly different from one another. So it seems that you need to have this geographic isolation to occur, or kind of like a prereq, in order for speciation to occur, or allopatric speciation, but is it really required? And so here's the picture showing the kingfisher of New Guinea, where we have our mainland, and then we have our island species that are geographically isolated, but they're birds. They should be able to leave the island and go to another island, but we really don't see that here, so it's kind of weird.
You don't want it.
No. So here I'm just showing a diagram of how allopatric speciation, where I have this one population of a species, a geographic barrier occurs, and it still remains, and so they all kind of diverge from one another. But then, you know, what happens if we were to move that geographic barrier? Now we have two separate species. Now we know that sympatric speciation can occur without geographic separation. So there's this debate, can one species split into two at a single locality without two new species ever having been separated? So there's two hypotheses. It could occur instantaneously or over the course of multiple generations. And so here with the allopatric, we have that geographical barrier, in this case, a gorge, if you want to call it that. And here with sympatric, I have this one species, but then over time I start to see a new species with no geographic barrier. Did you guys get that? Sorry. Okay. So let's look at instantaneous speciation through something called polyploidy. This occurs when an individual is born and it's reproductively isolated from all other members of the species. Polyploidy means that they have more than one set of genetic information. So in most cases, the individual is greatly different and may have adverse side effects. In humans, they would not survive if we were polyploidy, yeah. But there is one exception, and that is in plants. A lot of plants are polyploidy, like strawberries usually have 8 copies of chromosomes, of the same chromosome. So plants are usually polyploidy. They have more than 2 sets of chromosomes. That's why when we did our DNA extraction, we got a little bit of gunk, cloudy substances, but if we were to use strawberries, mash them up, strain them, it would have been like, it literally probably would have just looked like phlegm, like mucus phlegm, like someone just hocked a loogie in your test tube.
Nice.
Yeah. There's 2 ways polyploidy can arise. The first one's called autopolyploidy, where all the chromosomes arise from a single species. It's caused by an error in meiosis. So now the individual usually has 4 sets of chromosomes. We call it a tetraploid. This individual can fertilize themselves, or they can mate with other tetraploids, but they cannot mate with normal because the offspring would be a triploid, and it would be sterile due to uneven chromosome pairing. So they can mate with tetraploids, or, yeah, fertilize themselves.
So tetraploids.
Four sets.
And then it's just the same. Trias 3. Is there a di? Or 2?
It's called diploid.
Ah.
And we have haploid. Yeah.
Max.
Oh, that's what it's talking about.
Yep.
Okay.
Okay.
Can you fill it in a little bit, Mrs. E?
Oh, yeah. I'm sorry. Oh, gosh. I'm sorry. I forgot to fix it. How can you read that?
No, it's why not mine? There we go. Thank you.
It's good? God, it looks blurry to me, but I'm not going to mess with it, so you must have a camera on your end. Or then again, I'm not wearing my glasses. So. Okay, so here's a diagram showing Polyploidy. I have the parent species. It's 2N, so you can see my chromosomes are paired up nicely. For my gametes, I'm still 2N, but then they self-fertilize themselves. So now I have a tetraploid, where I have 4 copies of the same chromosomes. Okay, another way is allopatically. Here we have 2 different species that hybridize. The result is that the offspring will have 1 copy of chromosome from each species. The species is usually infertile because the chromosomes just don't match up correctly in meiosis. But it is healthy and it can reproduce asexually. It can become fertile through a variety of events as well. Like sometimes chromosomes will just spontaneously double or copy themselves. But over 200,000 species of plants are polyploid, have had some kind of polyploid episode in their history. So like bread wheats, cotton, tobacco, sugarcane, even bananas, potatoes. But in insects and fish, it's a little bit more on the rare side. But plants, it's very common. So in this diagram here, I have wild wheat with wild wheat, but you can see the chromosome numbers are different. It's like a different subspecies. And they fertilize. I have this sterile hybrid. And then all of a sudden, a spontaneous thing happens because this is an uneven number. They double, and now I have an even number, and it's fertile. So,
What?
yeah, crazy plants. We will be watching a video, I think Friday, on insects and plants and how they've kind of evolved together. I like to call it plant porn, but I'm sure you'll get a kick out of it.
So, like, in what stage does the number of chromosomes double? Is there a certain, do they call that a certain stage, or is it
No,
just randomly?
just spontaneously. So here's scenario number 1 with the Polyploidy speciation. Okay, I drew this as you can see here. So sorry if you can't read it. But here I have a species with 2N, okay, and it goes through normal meiosis, and my gametes are N3. So this is one species. Here's a different species. Note the different coloration. We'll call it species Y. The diploid number is 2N, so I have 4. Here's my normal gamete, and all of a sudden N3, N2 fuse. So now I have this random chromosome just chilling by itself. Okay, so it's infertile basically, but with other species, I should say. But it can self-fertilize. Okay, so it's going to maybe copy its chromosomes. So now I have an even number, and it can go through meiosis and form these hybrid germ cells down here. The gametes are N5. They can self-fertilize, and now I have this fertile hybrid. So crazy. That's scenario number 1.
Oh, one question. Is that
Yes.
hybrid with 5 of them? Is that only that one chromosome that's not paired, like unfertile, or is the whole thing?
Well, because this one chromosome is unpaired and this one chromosome is unpaired, well then when you fuse these 2 gametes, they can pair. It's crazy. Yeah. Here's another scenario. So I have species X, species Y. My gametes is just N and it's 2N, so it's kind of like just a weird occurrence how it happened. They fertilize together. Notice all these question marks because they don't have chromosomes to pair up with. So then it's still a gamete, but it might find another gamete from the former species and fertilize and produce a fertile offspring.
So that one just didn't split right, basically?
Yeah. So lots of ways that it could happen. Okay. Sympatric speciation can also occur through disruptive selection. So if you don't remember what disruptive selection, and this is Mitchell here, disruptive selection is if we think about our normal bell curve.
When there's a
Big
big
hole in the middle.
Yep.
And something, with natural selection, these individuals are selected against. Like they have a trait that's not feasible for them. Maybe if I'm talking about the finches, I have a bunch of small seeds and a bunch of large seeds, and the intermediate beak finches, they don't thrive, so they get eliminated. So as a result, I get two kind of like bell curves, but there's no middle. Okay, so that's disruptive selection. Can cause a population to contain individuals that exhibit two different phenotypes, as you can see in my bell curve right there. If the selection is strong enough, the two phenotypes could evolve and become different species, but we would need some kind of isolated mechanism. But initially, the two phenotypes would not be isolated at all. Genetic exchange between the two individuals tend to prevent genetic divergence in mating preference or isolated mechanism. So.
There's Eric. Eric's here. Right on schedule.
Right.
Okay, as a result, we would have two phenotypes. They would be retained in polymorphisms within a single population. This is also, again, kind of a rare occurrence. But here's an example. Lake Barumbai, Mabo, and Cameroon. Yes. An extremely small, ecologically homogeneous lake. No opportunity for lake isolation within itself. But we have one species of a closely related cichlid fish that occurs in the lake. All the other species are closely related evolutionary to one another than to any other species outside the lake. So I think, oh, never mind. I thought I had more on that. Maybe it's coming up here. Okay, moving on to adaptive radiation. We're going to talk about the Hawaiian Islands here mostly. And the Galapagos Islands also fit this profile as well. So adaptive radiation is where we have groups of a closely related species that recently evolved from one common ancestor, and they adapted to different parts of the environment. So like with our finches, we had 14 different species. They all came from one finch from the mainland, so that would be adaptive radiation. Hawaiian Islands, another great example. We'll talk about, again, Drosophila flies with the Hawaiian Islands. So adaptive radiation can occur when we have new islands created through volcanic activity. So we have this new environment. So organisms with a trait, some kind of key innovation that helps them survive in that environment, thrive while, with the new territory, basically. But it does require both speciation and adaptation to different habitats. There's a classic model, and I depicted it here, but we have species A that comes over from the mainland to this island. And then species A evolves into species B. And maybe species B colonizes a nearby island. Well, then that species evolves, maybe it moves to a new island or a new environment into species C, and so on and so forth. So they all kind of diverge from one another. So this is basically why with the Galapagos Islands we have 14 different finches.
So, I get how B flew to this other island and it created different.
Mm-hmm.
But how did A turn
Just
into
disappear. Or how did A?
B? Yeah, how did A turn into B?
They flew to this island, and this island had a new habitat. So then a key innovation that the species had prior, maybe a larger beak. I'm sorry, I'm just going to use a larger beak. Then, and because there's that barrier,
So why did
C
A
here.
Yeah, why did A
down to
Not exactly sure. I would have just left it because unless species A is the species from the mainland, and then they got to this island and then they changed themselves. That's probably
sense.
what happened.
Interesting.
Mm-hmm. So we call this character displacement. Population on different islands evolved to become different species. Again, the finches.
Comes back to those finches.
I know. So something about the species, it's got a trait or an adaptation that allows them to thrive, can use resources that other species cannot use. So as a result, their fitness increases, so they can reproduce lots of offspring, but over time species will diverge. Okay. Okay, we're going to look at 4 examples of adaptive radiation. The Hawaiian Islands, I talked a little bit about the Drosophila, how they were exploited in rich and diverse habitats. The Hawaiian Islands are the most volcanically active islands in the world. Lava often creates land islands. And Drosophila, they'll just, they fly and maybe they get picked up by winds and they'll go to this new volcanic islands and undergo speciation. So there's actually over 1,000 different species of Drosophila flies. And new ones are just being discovered, so it's...
I thought fruit flies are all the same.
You would think, but they're not. Oops. Okay, so then basically, like I said, it's a new habitat with, new plants, new species. Something about the Drosophila in this case allows them to thrive there and they can adapt to that new island. Or maybe they can avoid predation, parasites, herbivores. Maybe it's detritus leaf litter. But there is this connection that new species have evolved as new islands are colonized. So.
Is there any certain species that can evolve a lot faster than, like, say, humans? Is there a lot of them?
I would say anything that can reproduce very quickly. Like, that's why fruit flies.
They only live like a day though, don't they?
They live a little bit longer than that.
Really weak.
Yeah.
Mosquitoes.
Maybe you're talking about mayflies. They only got 24 hours to live.
Or, yeah, some kind of fly.
Better live it up.
The finches, another example of adaptive radiation. So the new arrivals of finches, they moved into vacant ecological niches. They adopted new lifestyles. They were subjected to sets of selection pressures like, heavy rainfall, drought conditions. And because of these conditions, and again, the geographic isolation because it's an island, they were able to rapidly split into diverse populations, which eventually led to evolved separate species. All right, another example. I think I'm coming back to my cichlid fish because I thought I had a diagram before, but I think they're all here now. Oh, never mind. We're still on the finches, I guess. So like I said, there's 14 species of finches. They can be divided into 4 groups. We have ground finches, feed on seeds, and the size of their bill is dependent on the size of seeds that they eat. We have tree finches. They eat insects. Of the 5, 4 of them feed on the insects, but one of them actually, their beak is fits to hold a cactus spine, and they use the cactus spine as a tool to probe for insects. So 4 of them are used to actually eat the insect. One is to adapt to the tool, in this case, the cactus spine. We have a vegetarian finch, which is a very heavy bill to kind of break into that heavy cellulose plants, and then warbler finches. They usually search for insects. Okay. So these numbers here indicate how many species we have of each.
There's just one vegetarian finch.
Yep. How we know that they all came from a common ancestor is that we've actually looked at DNA to study their evolutionary history. And the deepest branches are the warbler finches, so that suggests that they are the oldest. But the ground finches, they're pretty much closely related to one another, as well as to all the tree finches.
I have a quick question
Yes.
about this. But at the end of the year, do we have a final on the semester or on the year?
No, it'll just be the human body unit,
Okay.
which will be like 15 chapters.
And do we have to test out of or do we take a test at the end of this year, like a standardized test?
No.
Okay.
Because this is college biology. This is not AP.
Okay.
So you're guaranteed the college credit as long as you have a C or above. I think it's a C. I think it's, I don't know. I don't know the grade. I think it's a C. So again, diagram showing the evolutionary history of our 14 species of finches, which you have seen kind of before, earlier. Okay, here we go. The cichlid fishes, how they diversified very rapidly. So Lake Victoria, very immense, shallow freshwater sea, about the size of Switzerland in eastern Africa. And as of about right now, 300 species of cichlid fish can be found there. I think I'm saying that right, cichlid. I got to take a Latin class one of these summers. Cichlid? Cichlid. Cichlid. Okay.
Freshwater sea.
So a diagram showing Lake Victoria. It's kind of like made up of three little parts. They're kind of all slightly connected, but you can see we have different species of cichlids here. This evolutionary tree. The sizes here indicate how many species can be found in each little lake, and you can see that there are a lot of different species.
Let's go fishing then. Last trip.
Okay, so it has undergone a recent radiation geographically. Evolved very rapidly about 200,000 years ago. Kind of has to deal with the cytochrome B gene from the Nile. But we can look at the levels of the lake and see that there's been historically high and low. Like it gauges, it's very dynamic, we'll say. So as the lake rose, it opened up new area for new habitats, and then when the lake decreased, we had formed our smaller lakes that isolated them until the level rose again. So when the water rises, you know, all the fish, they can leave their former area and go to a new place, and then it leaves, and then we have a smaller lake that's been isolated. I think I have a diagram, maybe not. Okay, so how cichlid diversity came about. We have, these are small perch-like fishes. Males come in, again, variety of colors. Diverse eaters, just very, very diverse. We have those that are mud biters. They eat algae, leaf chewers, snail crushers. Got to watch out for those pedophages that eat small young cichlids. But one of the key innovations for cichlid diversity has to do with their jaws. As you can see here, with the different amounts of food that they have been able to eat, it's got to be the jaws. A lot of the jaws have been greatly enlarged, so that way they can manipulate their food and eat larger organisms. So diagram just showing a simplified version of cichlid: fish eater, snail eater, algae scraper, zooplankton, leaf, insect. But all these cichlids, they kind of have this evolutionary second set of jaws just sitting in the back there. During the last couple decades, there has been some extinction with the cichlid family. In the 1950s, Nile perch was introduced, which loved cichlids. In the 1990s, many open water cichlids went extinct. 70% of the species are now gone. So it has decreased. Last example is New Zealand alpine buttercup. It underwent speciation in a glacial habitat. And the mechanism behind these alpine buttercups had to deal with the recession of glaciers.
Spell check is ridiculous on this thing.
It's really bad.
Yeah, like none of the words are right.
Sometimes when I type the word right, it doesn't show it right.
It's just probably the app.
Yeah, the spell check's garbage on this.
Okay, there's a typo here. It's supposed to say more species, not move. There are more species of buttercups growing on just two islands, the two main islands of New Zealand, than all of North and South America combined. So a lot of these buttercups are found in New Zealand.
Alpine buttercups, what are they? Like a flower?
Yeah, they're a flower. Yep. We have found the buttercups in 5 distinct different habitats: snowfields, snowline fringes, stony debris sheltered situations, and boggy habitats. And because of all these different habitats and the repeated cycles of glacial advances and retreats, speciation and diversification has occurred. And your book provides a great diagram of the buttercups showing how this happens. So make sure you check it out. It's on page 447. Yeah. Oh, and I have one here too. So here you can see that the glaciers, they're in the alpine zones into like one continuous range, and then as the glaciers retreat, notice they're located at the top, and this opens up new territory for the buttercups to evolve. And then when the glaciers not recede, but the opposite of recede. Grow. Glaciers grow. No.
The glaciers say we're back.
Yeah, we're back. Okay.
We're back.
Glaciation, I think is what it's called, yeah.
So it's kind of like the same thing as the lake water level.
Yep,
going down.
yep. Now the pace of evolution can vary. It can be gradual, just very slow changes. It can be punctual. So we have this long periods of kind of stasis or level, but then all of a sudden it goes through very rapid change. And these rapid changes occur during the speciation process. It's Mr. Lee.
Alright, why do these things keep coming off?
But we have found that evolution kind of includes both of these types of changes. Okay. So a diagram showing the gradualism. So you can see very slow process, and then punctuated equilibrium, where it's like short bursts of changes and then stasis, and then short bursts of changes and then stasis again. Okay, looking at speciation and extinction through time, there have been 5 recorded mass extinctions. The most severe was the Permian period, which occurred 250 million years ago, where half of the plants and animal families, as well as 90% of all species, pretty much were perished.
So that happened before dinosaurs?
Yes.
I didn't know.
The most famous, though, is the dinosaurs one, the Cretaceous period. The leading hypothesis is that an asteroid slammed into Earth, kind of off the Yucatan Peninsula, causing global forest fires, obscuring the sun for months. So like this asteroid slammed into Earth, sent up dust and debris, pretty much covered the sun for weeks to months. Plants died because they couldn't get sunlight. So then the plant-eating dinosaurs died, and then the carnivores died.
So let's start with that.
Can't keep it real.
A diagram showing the 5 mass extinctions. So let's see here. Where's the Cretaceous?
Straight down.
65 million years ago. That's where probably the dinosaurs dropped off. So anytime it drops off, that's a mass extinction. There's the Permian right there. As we can see through the 5 mass extinctions, not all organisms were affected equally. So like in the Cretaceous, yes, dinosaurs were pretty much wiped out, as well as marine and flying reptiles, marsupials, flowering plants, birds, plankton. They were just reduced, basically. But our turtles, crocodiles, and amphibians were pretty much unscathed in this mass extinction.
I think vultures would be fine too, if there were such things. Dinosaur vultures.
That is true.
Yeah.
They just eat all the dead things.
The consequences of mass extinction is that some kind of previous dominant group will perish, aka dinosaurs, thus changing the course of evolution. So our dinosaurs, they were dominant. When they were wiped out, mammals arose, large mammals. Species diversity does not always rebound after mass extinctions. It's not, I mean, it does rebound, but it's not rapid. It occurs many, many years. There is a 6th extinction underway. And they believe that humans, our activities, are behind it.
That's not good.
That one I think might be debatable. You could argue that one.
Yeah, that'll happen.
Like, it's just like weird to think that like dinosaurs are like absolutely like were a real thing. Could you imagine that? It's
The
like,
heck is covering up the existence of Pokemon, I'm telling you.
but like, how come like things seem to have gotten like smaller? You know, like there was Megalodon, and now there's just Megalodon.
There is Megalodon,
Megalodon does not exist anymore. But
I mean, there is the blue whale, which is 100
There's
feet
giant
long.
squid.
Yeah, but
All right, the future of evolution.
T-Rex
Humans
on
kind of
that.
have a huge role in it because we do influence our environments, and as a result, we can affect evolutionary processes. So, decreased population size due to habitat fragmentation as well as pollution might increase genetic drift, and in an area that was isolated previously might be connected again. Small populations may evolve or become extinct because of us. We introduce alien species into new environments. So we increase isolation of population, which means we may increase speciation. I keep touching my face here. And then finally, the human gene pool is becoming homogenized as people from different ethnic groups or different origins reproduce. So
So are we becoming more diverse or less diverse?
less.
That's not good.
That's what homogenized means.
Yeah, it's garbage. So, we need
So
to
is there
tell
like
people
a
to stay-
heterogenized sort of thing?
That'd be like,
More diverse, right?
yeah.
So how would that happen if people kept? Like, how would that even
Moving
happen
to
if
different
people-
environments and becoming adapted to